Hello everyone, if you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
Everything changed overnight. Have you ever smiled at your family during dinner while secretly wondering if tomorrow everything you built could disappear? What would you do if one ordinary phone call erased years of hard work in less than 5 minutes? I never believed it could happen to me. I thought our family business was safe. I thought love could survive anything. I thought I was prepared for bad days. I was wrong. What happened next changed the way I looked at money, marriage, family, and even the simple English words I practiced every morning. If you're feeling tired, ready to give up, or wondering whether life can start over after losing everything, stay with me. My story begins on a quiet morning in America when everything changed overnight. My name is Emily, and this is my story. I live in the United States with my husband and our 2 children. Until recently, our family business gave us a comfortable life. We were not rich, but we had enough. Every morning started with fresh coffee, busy schedules, happy customers, and little conversations that made every day feel meaningful. I believed that steady work would always protect us. Looking back now, I realize life never signs that promise. One thing I loved was practicing English while opening our business every morning. Before the first customer arrived, I quietly read one short paragraph out loud. Slowly. Clearly. One sentence at a time. I believed that improving my English also improved my confidence. Sometimes I repeated simple phrases like, "Today is a new beginning," or "Every small step matters." At that time, they sounded like pleasant practice. I had no idea those simple words would soon become the only thing keeping me calm. America teaches you many beautiful lessons, but it also teaches you that nothing stays the same forever. Businesses rise. Businesses fall. Neighborhoods change. Customers change. Even people change. Scientists who study resilience often explain that our brains naturally fear uncertainty because the human mind prefers predictable routines. That fear is normal. The challenge is deciding whether fear becomes your prison or your teacher. The first warning arrived so quietly that I almost ignored it. Fewer customers walked through our door. Suppliers became slower. Bills became larger while sales became smaller. My husband smiled more often than usual, and somehow that worried me even more. I knew he was trying to protect me. I smiled back because I wanted to protect him too. We were both pretending everything would be fine. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I still remember the strange silence before I answered. Outside, the summer sun was shining. Inside, my heart suddenly felt cold. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but every sentence felt heavier than the last. By the time the call ended, I could barely breathe. Our family business was finished. I looked around the empty office. The same walls. The same desk. The same family photos. Nothing had moved, yet everything was different. I wondered how I would tell my children. I wondered whether my husband was blaming himself. Most of all, I wondered if we could ever begin again without losing the people we loved along the way. That evening, I stood in front of our house for almost 10 minutes before opening the front door. I forced a smile because I didn't want my children to see the fear in my eyes. But someone inside the house had already discovered the truth before I said a single word. And what happened after that became the most unforgettable night of my life. The silent house. People often think losing money is the hardest part of failure. It isn't. The hardest part is walking into your own home and pretending everything is normal while your heart is quietly falling apart. Have you ever smiled so your family wouldn't worry, even though you felt completely lost inside? That was me on the longest evening of my life. I believed I could hide the truth for one more night. I had no idea my daughter had already noticed something was terribly wrong, and the question she asked next would change our family forever. I slowly opened the front door and heard the familiar sounds of home. My son was laughing at something on television. My daughter was finishing her homework at the kitchen table. My husband looked at me for only a second before our eyes met. He didn't need an explanation. Somehow, he already knew. There was a silence between us that spoke louder than any conversation. I placed my bag on the counter and forced myself to smile. How was everyone's day? I asked as naturally as I could. My voice sounded calm, but inside, every heartbeat felt like another reminder that the future we had planned was suddenly gone. Dinner that night tasted different. The food was exactly the same as always, yet nobody seemed hungry. We talked about school, the weather, and weekend plans, carefully avoiding the one subject sitting at the center of the table. Then my daughter quietly looked at me and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" I froze. Children have an incredible ability to notice the emotions adults try so hard to hide. Before I could answer, she reached across the table and held my hand. That simple gesture almost broke me. After dinner, I walked into the living room and picked up the small notebook where I practiced English every evening. Reading slowly had always helped me relax. I opened to a page with a simple sentence, "Tomorrow is another chance." I whispered the words several times, carefully pronouncing each one. Listening to my own voice reminded me that progress often happens quietly. Even when life feels uncertain, one sentence, one conversation, one small step can keep hope alive. Later that night, my husband and I sat on the back porch while the neighborhood became completely still. Summer air drifted through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a train passed by. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he sighed and admitted something that surprised me. "I've been afraid for months," he said softly. He confessed that sales had been dropping much faster than he expected, but he kept believing things would improve. He didn't tell me because he wanted to protect me from worry. I realized I had been doing exactly the same thing. We had both been carrying heavy fears alone, even though we were sitting beside each other every single day. Psychologists often explain that sharing emotional burdens reduces stress because the brain no longer feels isolated during difficult situations. That night, I understood exactly what they meant. The problem hadn't disappeared, but speaking honestly made it feel slightly less impossible. We promised each other that no matter what happened next, we would face it together instead of pretending everything was fine. The following morning, I woke before sunrise. My phone buzzed with a notification I almost ignored. It wasn't from a customer. It wasn't from the bank. It was from someone I hadn't heard from in years. The message contained only one short sentence, "I think I have an opportunity for you." I stared at the screen, wondering whether this was the beginning of our second chance, or the first step toward an even bigger mistake. Looking for new hope. Have you ever received a message that looked so simple, yet your hands started shaking before you even replied? Sometimes your second chance doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives as one quiet sentence on your phone while you're still wearing yesterday's fear. I almost ignored that message. I almost convinced myself it was too late to start over. If I had deleted it, you would never be hearing this story today. Looking back, I realized the biggest opportunities often disguise themselves as the smallest decisions. I read the message again while the morning sunlight filled our kitchen. I think I have an opportunity for you. It came from Sarah, someone I had worked with years ago. We hadn't spoken in a long time, but she somehow heard about our family business. My first reaction wasn't excitement. It was doubt. Why would anyone offer help when my own business had just failed? My confidence had disappeared so quietly that I almost believed losing one business meant losing my value as a person. Sarah invited me to meet her at a small neighborhood coffee shop later that afternoon. The drive there felt much longer than usual. Every traffic light gave me another chance to turn around and go home. Fear has a strange way of sounding reasonable. It whispers that staying comfortable is safer than risking another disappointment. But another voice inside me kept repeating the English sentence I had practiced the night before: tomorrow is another chance. This time, I believed those words just a little more. The coffee shop was bright, peaceful, and full of people working on laptops. Nobody seemed to notice the woman sitting near the window, quietly wondering whether her life was about to change again. Sarah greeted me with a warm smile that immediately made me feel less alone. She didn't ask embarrassing questions. She didn't make me explain every painful detail. Instead, she said something I will never forget. Failure is information, not your identity. Those 7 words stayed with me. She explained that a growing local company was searching for someone with customer service experience, problem-solving skills, and the ability to connect with people. You spent years doing exactly that, she said. I almost laughed. Until that moment, I had only been thinking about everything I had lost. I hadn't stopped to think about everything I had learned. Running a family business had quietly taught me leadership, communication, patience, and resilience. Those skills hadn't disappeared simply because the business had closed. On my way home, I decided to practice my English differently. Instead of reading only from my notebook, I spoke to myself while driving. Slowly. Clearly. I can learn. I can improve. I am not finished. At first, it felt a little awkward. Then something unexpected happened. My voice sounded stronger with every sentence. Language learning experts often explain that speaking aloud improves confidence because the brain becomes familiar with hearing your own voice. Communicate successfully. I wasn't just practicing English anymore. I was rebuilding my belief in myself, one simple sentence at a time. That evening, my husband noticed the change before I said anything. You look different, he smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without pretending. We talked about the opportunity, and although neither of us knew what would happen next, hope quietly returned to our home. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It simply sat beside us like an old friend we thought we had lost forever. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was the hiring manager. She thanked me for applying and said she wanted to schedule an interview immediately. My heart raced with excitement until she added one unexpected sentence that completely caught me off guard. There's one important thing you should know before we meet. One small opportunity. What if the opportunity you've been praying for comes with a condition that makes you question everything? Would you still say yes? My heart was finally beating with hope after weeks of fear, but one unexpected sentence during that phone call nearly made me hang up. Sometimes life doesn't test your skills first. It tests your courage. Looking back now, I realized that moment separated the version of me who was afraid to fail from the version who finally believed she deserved another beginning. I tightened my grip on my phone as the hiring manager continued speaking. "Before we schedule your interview," she said kindly, "I want you to know this position is very customer-focused. You'll be talking with people every day. Communication matters as much as experience." For a second, the room became completely quiet. My mind immediately filled with doubt. Could I really do that? I had spent years speaking with customers through our family business, but this felt different. This wasn't my own business anymore. This was someone else's trust, someone else's expectations, someone else's chance. I thanked her for being honest and agreed to the interview. As soon as the call ended, fear returned like an old visitor who somehow still knew my address. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stared out the window. The neighborhood looked exactly the same, yet everything inside me felt uncertain again. Isn't it strange how one encouraging conversation can lift your confidence, while one small challenge can make it disappear? Instead of giving in to panic, I opened my English notebook. This time, I didn't read motivational sentences. I practiced everyday conversations. "Good morning. How can I help you today? Thank you for your patience. I appreciate your time." I repeated each sentence slowly, smiling after every attempt. I even recorded my voice on my phone and listened to it while folding laundry. At first, I noticed every mistake. Then, after listening several times, I noticed something more important. I was improving. Researchers who study language learning often explain that repetition combined with listening to your own voice strengthens pronunciation, confidence, and memory. That simple habit became part of my daily routine. 10 minutes in the morning. 10 minutes in the evening. I wasn't trying to sound perfect. I was trying to sound comfortable. There is a huge difference. The day before my interview, my husband surprised me. He handed me a small handwritten note before leaving the house. On it, he had written just 6 words, "They'd be lucky to hire you." I read that sentence over and over again. Sometimes confidence doesn't come from looking into a mirror. Sometimes it comes from someone who still believes in you when you've forgotten how to believe in yourself. The interview took place in a bright office filled with friendly faces. I expected difficult questions about business failure, but instead they asked about teamwork, solving problems, and helping people. I shared honest stories from our family business. I admitted our mistakes. I explained what they had taught me. Instead of hiding my past, I used it as proof that I could grow through challenges. The manager nodded several times, taking careful notes. When the interview ended, she smiled warmly and thanked me for being genuine. As I reached my car, I finally exhaled. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Maybe I hadn't been perfect, but I had been real. Just as I started the engine, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't the company. It was my husband. His message contained only 5 words, "Come home. It's urgent." My heart immediately began racing. After everything we had survived, I couldn't stop wondering, what could possibly have happened now? Learning to trust again. Have you ever seen the words "come home"? It's urgent flash across your phone and instantly imagined the worst? My hands became cold. My heartbeat drowned out every other sound. After losing our family business, I thought nothing else could surprise me. I was wrong. The drive home felt endless because my mind had already created 100 terrible endings. But what I found waiting inside my house wasn't another financial disaster. It was something far more emotional. And it forced our family to make the biggest decision of our lives. I barely remembered the drive home. Every red light felt unfair. Every minute felt too slow. My imagination raced ahead of reality. Was one of the children hurt? Had another bill arrived? Had something happened to my husband? Fear has a strange habit of writing stories before we know the facts. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had already lived through a dozen imaginary disasters. I rushed inside and found my husband sitting quietly at the kitchen table. The children were upstairs, completely unaware of the storm that had been building inside my mind. He stood up, walked toward me, and hugged me before saying a single word. That hug told me everything was serious, but not hopeless. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone," he whispered. He handed me an envelope that had arrived that afternoon. It contained the final legal documents confirming that our family business was officially closed. There would be no unexpected rescue. No last-minute investor. No miracle contract. It was over. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I looked around the kitchen where we had celebrated birthdays, planned vacations, and dreamed about expanding our business. Those dreams suddenly felt like memories from another lifetime. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of blaming each other, we both started laughing. It wasn't happy laughter. It was the kind that comes when life becomes so unbelievable that tears and laughter somehow feel exactly the same. That evening, we made hot tea and sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the American sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The neighborhood was peaceful. Children rode bicycles down the sidewalk. A neighbor waved while walking her dog. The world hadn't stopped simply because our plans had changed. "I've been thinking," my husband finally said. "Maybe we've spent too much time trying to save what was ending instead of preparing for what could begin." His words stayed with me. Later that night, I opened my English notebook again. Instead of practicing business conversations, I wrote one new sentence across the top of a blank page: "Trust grows one day at a time." I read it aloud several times, slowly and clearly. Learning English had quietly become something much bigger than language practice. Every sentence reminded me that progress doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives one word, one conversation, one brave decision at a time. Psychologists often explain that couples who communicate honestly during major life crises are more likely to recover emotionally than couples who hide fear from each other. Looking back, I understand why. The moment we stopped pretending to be strong alone, we became stronger together. Losing the business didn't break our marriage. Silence almost did. Honest conversations began putting the pieces back together. The next morning, we gathered the children before school and gently explained what had happened. They listened more carefully than I expected. Then my son surprised both of us. "So, does this mean we're starting a new adventure?" he asked with a smile. I felt tears fill my eyes. Maybe children understand hope better than adults. Just as we finished breakfast, my phone rang again. This time it was the hiring manager from the interview. I smiled, expecting good news. Instead, after congratulating me, she said something completely unexpected: "There's another opportunity I'd like you to consider. But it isn't the job you applied for." Building from nothing. What if the door you fought so hard to open suddenly closed, only because a much bigger one was waiting around the corner? I answered the hiring manager's call expecting either a job offer or a polite rejection. Instead, she said something that left me completely speechless. For a few seconds, I couldn't answer. My future had just changed again, but this time, the decision was entirely mine. Looking back now, I realize that one unexpected conversation became the turning point that saved not only our finances, but our family's confidence. I took a deep breath and listened carefully as the hiring manager continued. "Emily," she said warmly, "everyone who interviewed you was impressed by your experience with customers and by the honesty in your story. We do have the position you applied for. But another department believes you'd be an even better fit for a new community partnership program we're launching." I blinked in surprise. "A new program?" She explained that the company wanted someone who could build relationships with local families, support small businesses, organize community events, and help people feel connected. It wasn't just about selling products. It was about listening to people, solving everyday problems, and earning trust. As she described the role, I felt something unexpected growing inside me. Hope. For weeks, I had measured my future by everything I had lost. Now, for the first time, someone was looking at me because of everything I had learned. "I don't know if I'm qualified," I admitted honestly. She laughed gently. "Emily, qualified people usually don't ask that question. They ask how quickly they can start. The fact that you're thinking carefully tells me you care." Her answer stayed with me long after the call ended. That afternoon, I walked through our neighborhood in the warm American sunshine, trying to clear my mind. Children played basketball in a nearby driveway. A delivery truck stopped across the street. Neighbors greeted each other while walking their dogs. Everything looked ordinary, yet my entire life suddenly felt full of possibility again. I realized success wasn't always about owning a business. Sometimes it was about discovering where your experience could help someone else. During my evening English practice, I changed my routine once again. Instead of repeating short motivational phrases, I practiced introducing myself with confidence. "Hello, I'm Emily. It's nice to meet you. How can I help you today? I'd love to hear your story." Speaking those simple sentences aloud made me imagine future conversations instead of replaying past failures. Language experts often explain that connecting new vocabulary to real-life situations improves both memory and speaking confidence. Without realizing it, I wasn't simply practicing English anymore. I was rehearsing for a new chapter of my life. My husband noticed the change immediately. "You smiled today," he said while we cleaned the kitchen together. I didn't even realize I was smiling. He looked at me for a moment before quietly saying, "I think we're finally looking forward instead of backward." He was right. Over the next several days, we stopped talking about everything our old business had been. Instead, we filled notebooks with new ideas. Small ideas. Affordable ideas. Realistic ideas. We promised ourselves that if we ever built something again, we would build it with patience instead of pressure. Brick by brick. Customer by customer. Day by day. Then, just when life finally felt a little more stable, another surprise arrived. Late one Friday afternoon, the hiring manager called once more. "I have wonderful news," she said. "You got the position." I covered my mouth with my hand, unable to speak. Before I could celebrate, she added one final sentence that made my heart race all over again. "But there's one condition that starts on your very first day, and it involves someone you never expected to meet." The kids became our strength. Sometimes the person who changes your life isn't a millionaire, a famous speaker, or a successful business owner. Sometimes it's a child who says one sentence at exactly the right moment. I thought my first day at the new job would be the biggest turning point of my life. I couldn't have been more wrong. Before I even finished my first week, my own children taught me a lesson about courage that no business book, no motivational video, and no success story had ever explained. That lesson completely changed the future we were about to build. The hiring manager smiled as she welcomed me into the office on my first morning. After introducing me to the team, she explained the condition she had mentioned on the phone. Every new employee spends their first month visiting local families, community centers, and small businesses before working from the office. She said, "If we don't understand people, we can't truly help them." I loved the idea immediately. Every day became an opportunity to listen instead of simply speaking. I met parents opening neighborhood cafes before sunrise. I met retired couples volunteering at food drives. I met young entrepreneurs who had failed once, twice, even 3 times before finding success. Something surprised me about every conversation. Nobody was ashamed of failure. They spoke about it almost like another teacher in life. One afternoon, I visited a family-owned bakery that had nearly closed during difficult times. The owner smiled while handing me a warm loaf of bread and quietly said, "Our biggest mistake wasn't losing money. It was believing we had lost hope." Those words stayed with me all day. That evening, I shared the story with my family during dinner. Instead of feeling sad, my son grinned and asked, Mom, if they started again, why can't we?" My daughter quickly joined in. She grabbed a notebook, drew a big heart in the middle of the page, and wrote 3 simple words inside it. Family. Kindness. Courage. "I think this is our new business plan," she laughed. We all laughed with her, but something inside me became unexpectedly emotional. Children don't usually measure success by bank accounts or job titles. They measure it by whether people smile together at dinner. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that. Later that night, while practicing English, I decided to read children's books aloud instead of business articles. The sentences were simple, warm, and full of hope. Every day is a fresh start. Be kind. Keep trying. Reading slowly reminded me that powerful ideas don't have to use difficult words. Language teachers often explain that simple vocabulary repeated naturally is one of the fastest ways to improve listening, pronunciation, and speaking confidence. I noticed something wonderful happening. The calmer I spoke, the more confident I sounded, not only in English, but in life. Over the following weeks, our family created a new evening tradition. After dinner, each of us shared one good thing that happened during the day. Some days the answers were tiny. I helped a customer smile. I learned a new English word. I made a new friend. I baked cookies that didn't burn. Those small moments slowly rebuilt something much bigger than confidence. They rebuilt joy. Psychologists often say that gratitude changes the brain's attention from threats to possibilities. I didn't understand that before. Now I did. We hadn't erased our problems. We had simply stopped allowing them to become the only story we told ourselves. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, while cleaning the garage, my husband found an old notebook from our family business. Inside were dozens of ideas we had written years earlier but never had the chance to try. As we turned the pages together, one unfinished idea made both of us stop speaking. We looked at each other at exactly the same moment. Without saying a word, we both realized the same incredible possibility. Maybe our family's next beginning had been waiting inside that forgotten notebook all along. A new beginning. Have you ever opened an old notebook expecting memories, but found your future instead? I thought that forgotten notebook would only remind me of everything our family had lost. Instead, it revealed an idea we had abandoned years ago because life had been too busy. Ironically, losing our family business had finally given us the courage to look at that dream again. What happened over the next few weeks proved something I never expected. Sometimes your greatest comeback isn't built from something new, it grows from something you almost forgot. I carefully turned another page, and there it was. A simple sketch. A few handwritten notes. A small business idea centered on helping local families discover products and services from neighborhood businesses while creating genuine community connections. Years earlier, my husband and I had laughed about building something smaller, friendlier, and more personal than our first business. Back then, we thought bigger always meant better. Now we understood something completely different. Better doesn't always mean bigger. Sometimes it simply means more meaningful. The following Sunday afternoon, we spread papers across our dining room table. Instead of expensive business plans, we used notebooks, sticky notes, and pencils borrowed from our children. Everyone participated. My son suggested simple ways to make customers feel welcome. My daughter insisted every thank you message should be handwritten because people remember kindness longer than advertisements. I smiled because she was probably right. For the first time in months, our home no longer felt heavy. It felt creative. At work, I continued meeting families and small business owners across our community. Every conversation taught me something valuable. One cafe owner explained that loyal customers return because they feel appreciated, not because prices are the lowest. Another shop owner told me that people rarely forget how someone makes them feel during difficult times. Listening to these stories reminded me that successful businesses are built on trust long before they are built on profit. Every evening, I continued my English practice, but now it became part of our family's routine. We challenged each other to use one new English phrase during dinner. Nothing complicated. Just simple expressions like, "What made you smile today?" "I'm proud of you." "Let's keep going." Speaking slowly together made learning feel natural instead of stressful. Language researchers often explain that emotional conversations help people remember vocabulary more effectively because the brain connects words with meaningful experiences. Looking back, I wasn't only improving my English. I was creating memories that my family would carry for years. As our confidence slowly returned, something surprising happened inside me. I stopped comparing our new life with the old one. I no longer measured success by the size of a business or the number of customers we once had. Instead, I began noticing smaller victories. A satisfied client at work. A peaceful dinner with my family. A conversation where I spoke English without overthinking every word. Those tiny moments quietly became proof that healing rarely arrives all at once. It grows through ordinary days lived with extraordinary consistency. Psychologists often describe this as the progress principle. Even small daily achievements encourage the brain to keep moving forward because visible progress creates motivation. I understood that deeply now. We hadn't rebuilt everything overnight. We had simply refused to stop taking the next small step. One Friday evening, after dinner, our family gathered around the table once again. We looked at the updated notebook, smiled at each other, and finally agreed it was time to move beyond planning. We would officially begin building our new family project, one careful step at a time. There was excitement in the room, but also nervous silence. Starting over still felt scary. It always would. Just before we closed the notebook, my phone vibrated with a new email. The subject line immediately caught my attention. "We've heard about your story. We'd like to partner with you." I stared at the screen, completely speechless. Someone had been quietly watching our journey. And what they were about to offer could change our family's future forever. Success looks different now. What if the email that could change your life wasn't the miracle you expected, but the mirror you needed? I stared at the subject line for almost a full minute before opening it. My hands were shaking, not because I was afraid of hearing no again, but because I had finally reached the point where I realized success meant something completely different than it had a year earlier. The next few minutes would reveal whether our family's painful story had truly come to an end, or whether the biggest chapter was only beginning. I slowly clicked the email and took a deep breath. It wasn't from a giant corporation or a wealthy investor. It was from a regional organization that worked closely with family-owned businesses across several communities in the United States. They explained that one of the local business owners I had met through my new job had shared my story during a community networking event. Apparently, people weren't only impressed by the fact that we had lost everything. They were inspired because we refused to let failure become our final identity. The email invited my husband and me to present our new family project during a weekend community showcase. They weren't offering us money. They weren't promising instant success. They were offering something even more valuable. Visibility. Opportunity. A fresh beginning earned through honesty. I smiled because this time, I didn't feel pressure to impress anyone. Months earlier, I would have worried about perfect presentations, perfect numbers, and perfect results. Now I only wanted to tell the truth. Our story had become our greatest strength because it was real. Over the next several evenings, our dining room turned into a tiny workshop again. We practiced introducing our idea, organized simple presentation materials, and even asked our children to listen and give honest feedback. My daughter laughed and said, "Mom, smile more. People trust happy faces." My son added, "And don't forget to tell them we almost gave up." That's the best part. He was right. People don't usually connect with perfection. They connect with perseverance. As part of my preparation, I continued practicing English every morning. Instead of memorizing complicated vocabulary, I focused on speaking naturally. Our family learned something important. We're grateful for a second chance. Every ending can become a beginning. Language specialists often explain that confidence grows faster when learners master simple, useful expressions before attempting advanced ones. That advice matched my life perfectly. Small improvements had quietly transformed both my English and my confidence. Neither happened overnight. Both happened because I kept showing up every day. The community showcase arrived on a bright Saturday morning. Families filled the event space. Children laughed between booths. Local musicians played soft music while neighbors greeted one another like old friends. Standing there beside my husband, I suddenly realized something surprising. I wasn't nervous. I was grateful. When it was finally our turn, I looked around the room and shared our journey honestly. I spoke about losing our family business, the difficult conversations at our kitchen table, the fear that followed us for weeks, and the tiny daily habits that slowly helped us rebuild our confidence. I even smiled while explaining how reading simple English sentences every morning reminded me that progress begins with one small step. When I finished speaking, the room became completely quiet. For one long second, nobody moved. Then someone in the audience stood up and started clapping. Another person followed. Soon the entire room was applauding. I looked at my husband, and tears quietly filled both of our eyes. On the drive home, we laughed more than we had in months. It felt as though a heavy door had finally closed behind us. Then my phone rang. It was the event organizer. Her voice sounded excited. "Emily," she said, "there's someone here who wants to meet you before you leave. They've been waiting all afternoon. And what they're about to offer your family could become the opportunity you've been searching for since the day you lost your business." Here's the final section in English. We started again. What if losing everything wasn't the worst thing that could happen? What if the real tragedy was never discovering the stronger version of yourself hiding behind that loss? When the event organizer asked me to come back inside, I had no idea that the next conversation would complete the journey that began with one heartbreaking phone call. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. Because the ending of this story isn't about money, business, or success. It's about the moment I finally understood why everything had happened exactly the way it did. I walked back into the community center with my husband beside me. Most families had already gone home. Volunteers were folding chairs, cleaning tables, and saying goodbye after a long but joyful day. Near the stage stood a woman with a warm smile, waiting patiently. She introduced herself as the director of a regional program that supported small family-owned businesses. She shook my hand and said something that immediately stopped me in my tracks. "We've been listening to your story today," she said. "But what impressed us wasn't that you lost your business. It was the way your family treated each other after you lost it." For a moment, I couldn't answer. She continued, "Skills can be taught. Business plans can change. Markets rise and fall. Character is much harder to build. Your family already has that." Those words meant more than any financial offer ever could. She explained that their organization wanted to mentor our new family project, connect us with experienced business owners, and introduce us to local partners who believed in supporting honest, community-focused businesses. There were no promises of instant success. There were no shortcuts. Just guidance, encouragement, and an opportunity to keep growing. This time, I wasn't excited because someone might save us. I was excited because nobody needed to. We had already learned how to stand again. Over the following months, our family slowly built the new project we had once sketched inside that forgotten notebook. We worked carefully. We listened to customers. We celebrated small victories instead of chasing impossible perfection. Some weeks were busy. Others were quiet. But unlike before, we never measured success only by numbers. We measured it by peaceful dinners, by genuine smiles, by weekends spent together, by conversations where nobody felt the need to hide fear anymore. Every morning, before beginning work, I still opened my English notebook. Some habits are worth keeping forever. I read one simple sentence aloud each day. Keep going. Be grateful. Kindness always matters. Those short English sentences became more than language practice. They became daily reminders of the woman I had become. Language experts often explain that consistent, relaxed practice creates lasting improvement because repetition builds confidence naturally over time. Looking back, I realized that my English had improved in exactly the same way our family had healed, one quiet day after another. One evening, nearly a year after losing our family business, we sat together on our back porch watching another beautiful American sunset. My son smiled and asked, "Mom, if you could go back and change everything, would you save the old business?" I looked across the yard, then at my husband, then at my daughter. Finally, I smiled. "No," I answered softly. Everyone looked surprised. If we had never lost it, I continued, we might never have found the life we truly needed. Silence filled the porch, but this time it wasn't the painful silence from months earlier. It was peaceful. It was grateful. It was home. Life didn't become perfect after we started again. We still faced unexpected problems. We still made mistakes. But now we knew something we hadn't known before. Failure is not the opposite of success. Giving up is. If you're listening to my story today while carrying disappointment, fear, or uncertainty, I hope you remember one simple truth. Your next chapter does not begin when life becomes easy. It begins the moment you decide that your story is not over. Maybe you're learning English one sentence at a time. Maybe you're rebuilding a career. Maybe you're trying to heal a relationship. Whatever your journey looks like, never underestimate the power of one small step repeated every single day. Because that's exactly how our family started again. That's all for today. I'll make many more videos like this in the future. Please subscribe so you don't miss them.